this cold, rainy Sunday. Never going to complain about the rain, though. We need the rain. I want to do something a little different this Sunday and spend a little time with the Psalm. I don't often do that. We don't really spend a lot of time with the Psalm, even though we read the Psalms every single week. It's the one thing, the one book we read every service. No matter what service we do, we have something from the Psalms in it. But often, it's probably for me, the thing I preach the least on is the Psalms. So I wanted to spend a little time with the Psalms today, specifically Psalm 62 and specifically the first 4 verses that we read, 6 through 9. But just a little backstory first. The Psalms are the prayer book of the New Testament. If that makes sense. The Psalms were Israel's prayer book. It's what Jesus and the disciples grew up learning, what Mary and Joseph and all of Israel grew up learning were the Psalms. And there were certain Psalms that would be prayed for certain days. And the idea was within the Psalms, there's a prayer for any occasion. Because the Psalms were written, it wasn't just, someone that just sat down and just was feeling prayerful that day and wrote down a bunch of Psalms. They were born out of sometimes joy, sometimes sorrow, sometimes heartbreak, fear, anxiety, all the different emotions that you and I feel, right, that as we live life, created the Psalms. And so the thought was there's a psalm, there's words to pray that match the struggle or the celebration that we go through in life. And so today's psalm is a psalm that comes from a place of a heavy heart. Comes from a place of a heavy heart. And so there's 3, I think, emotions or situations, 3 kind of circumstances that this psalm can speak to. At least 3. I'm sure there's more, but at least 3 that this psalm can speak to. And if we're in any of these spots, or maybe in the future might be in one of these spots, this psalm might be helpful. Psalm 62. And so the first one is, this psalm is helpful because it comes from a place of feeling frustrated and hopeless when we've messed up and now we're living with the consequences of our mistakes. Right? So if life is hard because of mistakes we've made, decisions we wish we could take back, this psalm speaks to that. Let me explain. David, who wrote many of the Psalms, not all of the Psalms, but many of the Psalms, wrote this psalm at a specific time in his life when he was on the run from a coup that was attempted by his son, Absalom. David's son, Absalom, 31 years into David's reign, attempted a coup and for a while, a successful one. Overthrew the king, King David, his father, drove him out of the palace and on the run as a fugitive, living through the country on the run from Absalom's military, hunting him down to kill him. A son going after his father. But David feels a bit responsible for this for a variety of reasons, but one of the main ones is when David, years earlier, 14 years before this coup happened, the story of David and Bathsheba occurred. If you don't know the story, just very, very briefly, David desired a married woman who was married to one of his soldiers. What he did was he sent the soldier into battle in a place where he knew he would be killed so that she would be legally and in the eyes of the public free to marry him. David orchestrated that. There was blood on his hands. He killed a man to have his wife. And the Lord spoke to him, even though David repented of the action, the Lord spoke to him through his prophet Nathan and said, because you've destroyed this family, the sword will visit your own home too. Now, 14 years goes by. Maybe David forgot about it. Maybe David had thought God had relented, or maybe thought that wasn't a prophecy that wasn't going to be fulfilled. But 14 years later, his own son, Absalom, rises up with the desire to overthrow him, kill his father, and take the crown and the kingdom for himself. And David, the king, who had lived in palaces and had commanded the military now for 31 years as king, is now on the run, living in tents, fleeing with a group of military men that are loyal to him, on the run from his son and the military men that are loyal to Absalom, trying to hunt him down. And in the midst of this, David writes this psalm. You can understand why it starts, "For God alone my soul in silence waits. Truly my hope is in him." Right? There is no other place for David to put his hope. David can't put it in himself because he's partially responsible for this situation. He can't put it in his family because his son is the one that's trying to kill him. David has nowhere else to put his hope but God alone and in his mercy. Because even when life is hard because of mistakes we've made, God's mercy is still for us. David knows that. Our hope is in him. Even when we've screwed up, our hope is in him. And so that's one circumstance, maybe when we're living through a season of life, when life is hard because we've just made some mistakes. We could use David's words, "For God alone my soul in silence waits. Truly my hope is in him." Well, the second circumstance is what follows from that, when we are experiencing a hardship in life because of someone else's bad decisions. Now, David bears some responsibility. Absalom, as well, is going after his own father, and David is heavy-hearted because there's only two ways this story ends, right? Father kills son or son kills father. Both of them grieve him. Absalom doesn't seem to be as bothered by it, but David is grieved by the thought that this coup and this rebellion only ends with one of them killing the other. And he is put in this circumstance partially through his own sin and partially through Absalom's pride and greed and desire for power. And so David's kind of at the mercy of Absalom for 6 months, as David, who was king, who lived in palaces, now at 61 years old, is forced to kind of go back to the fields and camp and go back and revisit those who are loyal to him for some food and shelter. And he is living at the mercy of others. And maybe there's seasons in our life where we might find ourselves, our decisions or our quality of life or our professional life is affected by others. Maybe others that we don't feel are making great decisions or are making terrible decisions. And they're affecting us. They're affecting our family. They're affecting how we live. And you can hear that in the psalm too, as David says, "He alone is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold, so that I shall not be shaken. And God is my safety and my honor. God is my strong rock and my refuge." There is no safe place for David anymore. Right? Physically, all the things he thought were his safety places, his palace, his city, the walls of Jerusalem that he helped build, all those things, he has no safety in them anymore. In his own home and with his own family, he has no safety anymore. So he looks to the Lord and said, "God, you alone is my safety and my honor. You are my refuge." Some translations would say, "You are my fortress, the place I can go hide and be safe." And so when we're facing those circumstances, when life is hard because of other people's bad decisions, other people is making life hard for us, we can turn to him. This is what the psalm calls us to. Turn to him as our refuge, as our safe place, as our fortress. And then the last one is something we all probably find ourselves in often, when we don't know what the future holds. When we don't know what's going to happen. And if you've ever been through kind of a professional change or some health crises, you understand that feeling where you don't know necessarily how it's going to work out. You have hopes, but you don't know. And David's in that spot. He doesn't know if he's going to regain the kingdom, or if he's going to be put to death by his son, or if he's going to have to kill his own son to stop the coup. He doesn't know. All the options that he sees are bad. He doesn't know. And, how many times have we been in situations in our life where we just might not know what's going to happen? We live to try to create routines for us so that we can predict, right? So that we know, hey, this is Tuesday, this happens on Tuesday, this is Wednesday, right? We try to create a routine so that we know. But there are times when things upset that. We don't know. It might be a job thing. It might be a family thing, a health thing, right? It could be lots of things. And so David's in one of those times. He doesn't know what's going to happen in 4 months, 5 months, a year. He doesn't know. Will he be king again? Doesn't know. But he turns to the Lord. He says, put your trust in him always, O people. Pour out your hearts before him, for God is our refuge. So just pour out your heart before him. In those moments, this is what David does. Now, David is not a perfect person by any means. But David turns to the Lord even when he's screwed up, even when he's got problems, even when he doesn't know. He pours out his heart before the Lord. And Psalm 62 is calling us to do the same. When we're in one of those situations where we don't know what the future is going to look like, maybe it makes us nervous to pour out our heart before him and put our trust in him. Because he'll be there. Whatever the future is, God will be there. Put our trust in him. Pour out our hearts to him. So I love what this psalm kind of is teaching us today. And maybe it's helps us to see it in a different way, that if we're finding ourselves in a tough spot because of a mess we've made, this psalm calls to us to put our trust in him, his mercy, his grace, even for our screw-ups, his mercy and his grace, no matter how bad they might be. Remember, when I first started, I was a brand new rector at our church in Wyoming. And the rector's office had this hideous wallpaper border. And I was just like, I got to change that. It was like grapes and flowers or something. I don't even know why they did that in the office. Who thought that was a good idea? But it had this hideous wallpaper border, and I said, okay, I'm just starting. I'm gonna make this office my own. I'm gonna steam the border down. And so I was like, it'll be easy first way to kind of settle in. It was my first time as a rector, leading. I was scared. I was nervous. I thought, this is an easy thing. I don't know that I know how to be a priest. I'm still not sure, but I knew how to take down wallpaper border. So I felt I could start there. And so I was taking down the border, and it was about a day of me doing that, and somebody walks in the office. It was somebody coming to visit, and it was a man who had AIDS, and he had contracted it through the use of drugs through hypodermic needles. And he was trying to find a church. He wanted to sit down and talk about, is there mercy for him? He's since passed, but he wanted to talk about, is there mercy for him? And I thought, this is not what I had in mind for an easy first week. But I can do this because the answer is yes, right? Even when we screw up, even when our screw-ups are bad, there's mercy for us. We can put our hope in him. That's what David's calling for us. When we make mistakes, when we're suffering because of other people's mistakes, when the future is unclear, let God be our hope. Let God be our refuge. Let God be where we put our trust. He will get us through. His mercy is enough to heal even our deepest wounds, our biggest mistakes, and he's in the future, waiting for us already to provide, to care, to lead. So our trust, our hope, and our refuge. Let God be those things if we find ourselves in times of trouble. In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.